So as we are starting to see how family systems really informs our work with domestic violence families or families who've experienced domestic violence and those clients who come in for help. Um, some of the most effective interventions for client are the following, and I have to kind of emphasize that there are several interventions that can be helpful while working with a client in this context and while incorporating family systems theories and approaches. Um, but what works for one client definitely might not work for another client, so it is important to kind of keep that in mind. For this client, the first couple things that were done with the client were to create a genogram. The genogram helped the client to determine who was in her family, um, what what the relationships and the dynamics between each family member looked like, if there was a pattern of a certain type of interaction between one family member and another family member, and it really helped her to see the history of some of these interactions that she was experiencing. Um, in addition to the genogram, client created a timeline to see, you know, what some of her relationships looked like when some of these things first started happening, um, how she responded to certain events in her life, and this genogram and timeline together helped help client to identify patterns. She was able to see, at certain times in her life when she felt she was doing well and when she felt she wasn't, and how much or how little the um, relationship she was in, how that impacted, her well-being and what she was doing in her life and where she was at. Um, and being able to identify, these sequences helped her determine what it is that she wanted to do in terms of um, adjusting herself in the context of her family. So she was able to use these patterns and these sequences that she identified by this genogram and this timeline and explored these in her family sessions and in her individual sessions to determine what are some of the changes that actually need to be made. While it was really easy for her to say, this life is unhealthy, or I want things to change, she was able to realize that there are some things um, and some relationships that have always been strong, always been healthy, and for the most part, that was with her children. So she did choose to really focus on her relationships with her children and how to promote the healthiness of those relationships. Um, One of the conversations or discussions that really took an emphasis and focus of some of the individual sessions and the group sessions um, was the topic of her family history and the role of culture. She had an idea that her parents were not the ideal model of interactions between intimate partners. Um, but as she, was experiencing her own relationships and thinking that maybe something needed to change, it seemed as though that wasn't something that was going to be accepted by her parents. Uh, she said that in talking to her mom told her that once you're in a relationship, once you're married, once you're with a partner, you stay married no matter what. And as client discussed some of these things in group, she started realizing that a lot of this was also what was culturally acceptable. The client identified as a Hispanic female, and many of the clients in groups have said that with the Hispanic culture, um, once you're married, again, you stay married. Once you have you're with your partner and you have children, then you remain in that relationship to take care of your children no matter what. There is this idea that um, the man is, the provider and takes care of the family in that way, and the woman is the caregiver and takes care of the family in that way. And so, um, client really, adapted to these roles based on what she was hearing from her own parents, based on what she was hearing from other people in her culture, and she was able to use this to decide whether or not that was okay for her. It wasn't about what was acceptable, from by her parents, or what was acceptable by culture or even society. It's what was acceptable to her. So she was able to identify her own idea of healthy and unhealthy, and assess for all this past, all these past and present interactions, and realize that it wasn't just her. It was in fact this family system and this cultural community system kind of thing that she carried on, because again it worked for her at the time, and that was all she knew. So that was something that really exploring that role of family history and culture was something that really worked to identify what was healthy and unhealthy for her. Um, as clients started working on this stuff individually and in group, um, she did occasionally, as mentioned, bring in her children a few times, and in those family sessions, um, and even individually, client would talk and explore, about the each family member's roles um, in the family, and in order to really determine what those roles would be and what these new roles would become after that family system sort of changed, um, they emphasized the idea of practicing communication, effective communication, and active listening skills into the sessions, to express what they wanted and what they needed, and their thoughts and feelings about the changes and transitions that were going on with the family. Client was very much able to express herself to her children in a positive way and listen to her children, so that they could determine together what their family functioning looked like and what was best for each of them as she made these decisions for the family, with the family in mind. Um, and for client, in addition, other things that helped work for her was that she was given opportunities to observe her own individual behaviors and how it impacted others, not only in family counseling but also through group. So until now, or until services were started, a client didn't really realize how individual behaviors impacted others. But when talking to other group members, she did start to see that one person's actions and behaviors can impact someone else's, and she was also able to see that how her own words, her own thoughts and feelings triggered and affected other people in the group, both positively and negatively. And over time, she actually became one of the most affirmative members of the group at that time, to to really create this positive mindset and positive mentality, because she understood how her behaviors and actions were impacting others, and how they were impacting her family. And she worked really hard to shift that a little bit, because just as those negative interactions and unhealthy, aggressive, or violent behaviors could impact somebody for the negative, positive, affirmative, you know, strength-based interactions could impact others for the positive, and that's what she really focused on over time. Um, so just to kind of give an idea of where client ended up, client did participate in services for a little while, for about a year, pretty regularly, um, between individual sessions for the first few months and then in groups. And she did report multiple indications of progress, and some of those have to do with her ability to kind of increase her sense of independence. She stated that she had more healthy interactions with her children, and she showed that this is possible, or that this was evident as she became more involved in their personal, social, and academic activities. And so she was helping them with their homework. She she invested more in the relationships that they had with their friends, and encouraged a lot of activities and social um, events and things like that to happen at her house, so she could be a part of it and make sure that they're positive and healthy. She also um, volunteered to be part of the PTA at the school, so that she could be a part of the learning and what was going on in that educational system. So that was something she took on herself that she did not feel she had the confidence to do when she was in her relationship with her partner. Um, she also reported an increase in her level of self-esteem, and that led to an increase in level of her independence. And because of this, she actually obtained her own resources, her own free resources to file for a divorce and have an attorney help her do that. And she finalized it. And although she never thought she would ever get divorced, she did determine that this was what was healthier for her and her family, and she was able to maintain um, enough of an amicable relationship with her husband, or her ex-husband now, so that they could co-parent together in a healthy way. And the children also reported to her that they feel that their relationship with their father is stronger, because that negative dynamic was removed between mom and dad. Um, she was also able to enroll in school to complete her GED. She wasn't able to, complete high school when she was younger, and so she took the initiative to find the resources to help her go back to school and complete that. And she also obtained a part-time job. So some of these things happened per her report because of her increased level of self-esteem, that she felt she was able to do it. Things could change. She was confident, and that was um, nice to hear that report. Um, After participating in her different services, she felt more comfortable developing new relationships with her peers, with more comfortable talking to people in group, and before terminating the individual component of services, she did report that she had entered a new relationship, having kind of assessed and trying to identify if there were any possible red flags, or unhealthy characteristics that she had identified to be unhealthy for her. Um, she reported that it was a healthy relationship, and was taking it very, very slowly, but that it was something that she was starting to do. And so that was something she reported to be positive for her, to be comfortable with this idea of having a new relationship at all, because she had thought to herself that the only relationship she would ever have and could ever have um, was that abusive marriage. Um, Client remains or remained in group counseling as a part of, to maintain her support and to check in. She would go every couple weeks just to kind of check in and make sure that she was maintaining the progress that she identified, and she realized that she needs to continue building that support and maintaining that support in order to remain where she wanted to be, so that she doesn't kind of go back and forth with those different cycles that often comes with domestic violence. So that is what uh, some of the progress for client looked like, at least before she stopped participating in services altogether. And lastly, as we're learning about all of these different ideas under family systems approaches, and how we relate it to working with clients who've experienced domestic violence, there's a few different interventions or ways of working with clients to kind of take into consideration, so that it makes it a little more smoother of a process to work with clients that have experienced domestic violence, and possibly their families. Um, so taking pieces from some of our readings, it's important to explore the idea of balance, harmony, and leadership um, as a way of kind of helping clients and families identify what their individual roles are within the system. In a family that's experiencing domestic violence, there's little balance and little harmony, and the leadership role is often is taken. It's determined by one person who the leader is going to be, and what everyone's role in the family is, and how that's going to look. And because of that, again, there lacks balance and harmony. So really looking at that, those dynamics with the client and the family. Who is the leader? Why are they the leader? And how can we best get back that sense of balance, and then in turn, that will lead us to that idea of harmony. So looking at those concepts and exploring that with a family with who's experienced family violence can be difficult, but it's also very critical. As a therapist, it's very important to assess and constantly reassess personal values and beliefs with this idea of balancing that therapeutic alliance and then that sense of neutrality. And I know that idea of neutrality was brought up in readings very thoroughly. So it's very important to align, as best as possible with the family, um, taking out what those personal beliefs and values might be, because it's going to be very apparent if your own thoughts and ideas are being, implemented into those interventions. However, on the other hand, we do not want to be unbiased or too neutral, as that could almost come as if we're condoning maybe that violent or aggressive, that negative behavior. But it can be really easy for for therapists to maintain whatever their idea is of whether or not this client should be in this relationship, what they think is healthy or unhealthy, what therapist thinks is unhealthy or unhealthy, and then putting that on the client. Really important not to do that, and to focus on what client wants, what is healthy and unhealthy for the client, and assisting the client in that assessment and coming up with goals that align with that assessment. Again, without being too neutral. So what I like to say is helping clients determine what is healthy and unhealthy for them, what's working and not working for them, and then deciding what's right for them, while also keeping safety in mind. So if there's an idea that what their decision isn't safe, then to kind of look at it that way. How can this impact your safety and security with your family? And that often helps clients from not feeling like you're attacking them or putting your personal beliefs on them. Throughout working with clients who've experienced DV, continuing to check in regarding that willingness and readiness for change. That can be really important for both the therapist and the client. So we talked a little bit about DV cycles and patterns, but this idea that domestic violence is a really hard dynamic or issue to remove yourself from. So it has been said that it takes the average is about 7 times for a client, or sorry, not just a client, an individual to leave an abusive situation. So that means some people are able to do it in um, on less occasions, but some people take even more than 7 times to leave and then come back and leave again. One of the questions in our assessment is how many, is this the first time, or are you currently with your partner? Have you tried to leave before? And if you have, how many times, and what makes you return or stay in that relationship if you haven't tried to leave? And continuing to assess that with the client is going to be really helpful for the therapist and the client, because again, it can be difficult for those clients to make any little changes. And if there's a mindset that the client is ready when they're not, there might be a high level of expectation on that family that should not be there. Um, Continuing to assess readiness and then also exploring reasons why there might not be any changes or have not been any changes made in the past. This really helps a therapist from labeling client as resistant. With DV families and DV clients, there is a lot, it's really easy for someone to look at someone else and say they don't want to change. But again, there's so many reasons why a client has chosen not to make changes in their family system, in their family dynamic, and has chosen to stay in that situation. It's not because they want to be in an abusive setting. It's not because they want to be, hurt or they like the abuse. And unfortunately, that is one of the myths that comes up a lot in teaching people about domestic violence. Um, but it could be religious reasons, cultural reasons, to help to for the interest of their kids, financial reasons. That mainly it's fear, fear of not knowing what could happen if they leave. A lot of clients, I've actually heard this said to me that they are more afraid of leaving, not knowing what could happen next, than staying, knowing possibly that they'd be abused all the time or every day, but also knowing that they're financially taken care of, that their kids are taken care of, and if they leave, they do not know what will happen, if they can provide, or if their partner will hurt them even more, um, since they're not no longer in the home with them and they don't know what to expect. So again, just really assessing for readiness, seeing where they're at, and making sure that that they're not feeling pushed into making these changes. Um, Constantly assessing and reassessing with clients can be really important to determine benchmark where clients are at and getting the feedback from the clients. What's working for them? What doesn't work? Are these the goals they want to work on? Are they not? Are they relevant anymore? In our program, there's a reassessment done every 6 months, and this actually helps to see how far removed from the situation, the initial experience of domestic violence that they reported, how far removed they are. And if they are identifying another incident of domestic violence within those 6 months, then that helps to kind of reestablish whatever their goals might be. Or if there's a report of different communication or a different type of unhealthy interaction for them, that might show a sign of progress depending on what their goal was. Another important idea to keep in consideration is to demonstrate empathy rather than sympathy. It can be a really big part of it, of establishing and building rapport and strengthening that therapeutic relationship if there is this feeling that the therapist understands or comprehends where the client is coming from, rather than just feeling bad for the client. So really understanding a lot of the dynamics of domestic violence, a lot of these ways to approach client in this family systems technique that could help to demonstrate that empathy. I understand where you're coming from, maybe why some of these experiences, why you made some of these decisions, and I'm here to help you and support you, in reaching your goals rather than to just feel bad for you. So that's a good differentiation to figure out how to make. And then lastly, something that has been said a little bit throughout this presentation is working with clients and families to make their own interpretations. So we talk about interpretations, or it was discussed, interpretations were discussed in our readings, and being able to help clients and their families make their own interpretations is pretty important. As I mentioned, the client had been discussing, came in not really knowing what was healthy or unhealthy, and as a therapist, putting ideas into the client on what is healthy or unhealthy to them could impact the best way, or impact the ability to change. And so working with clients and families to make their own interpretations based on what they're learning. So maybe using statistics, using psychoeducation, using facts about domestic violence and research that can help clients learn what unhealthy and healthy might be, but ultimately it needs to be up to them to interpret healthy and unhealthy themselves. Because otherwise, with all of these, there's a really big chance for a therapist to really put all of their thoughts and values and beliefs onto the client, because what they think is acceptable or positive or healthy might be different than what the client thinks. So those are just a few ways and ideas to work with a client and their family with their best interest in mind, to really help them determine what is healthy, what is unhealthy, what works, what doesn't work, and to create goals that align with the client's needs, align with safety, and also implement or adopt those family systems approaches, whether you're working with the individual or you're working with the family as a whole. So that wraps up the presentation I have, and these are just a couple of, or some of the resources that I was able to kind of use and review as part of my presentation. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me, and I appreciate everyone listening. Thank you.